Uh, okay, I'm Gab, and this is Dave, and we are on the Fringe, slicing, dicing, and chopping it up. And today we're going to be talking about the Philippines, and we're no longer talking about Miss Alice Guo, the ex-mayor of a northern Filipino town who was arrested for involvement in illegal gambling activities and all kinds of nonsense, then went on the run. They couldn't find Alice. Where's Alice? Alice went all the way to Indonesia, got picked up there, was sent back, and now we don't really know what's going on with Alice. We have not been hearing a whole lot about Alice Guo, and there is not a lot being written about her, except that she is still in custody somewhere in the Philippines, and she's still getting charged with stuff. Uh, we're not talking about Alice today. What are we talking about, Mr. Dave?
Well, this is something that's almost out of a William Shakespeare play. You've got the two houses in the Philippines. You've got the House of Duterte, and you've got the old House of Marcos. And this is not your typical Romeo and Juliet love story where one person is going to die and the other person is going to die for each other. But you might have two people dying, and it's not going to be good if that happens. Dun,
No,
dun,
it is
dun.
not. No, it is not. So, just for context for listeners who are unfamiliar with Filipino politics, what lucky, lucky people you are. Um, so, currently in the Philippines, it the Philippines political system is similar in some ways to the American political system. It used to be an American colony. That's why uh, they have a president and a vice president. Unlike America, the president and the vice president are actually elected separately. So you do not always wind up with a president and vice president who actually get along with each other. Now, this time seemed different, but it has fallen apart very quickly, very spectacularly. Now, the current president is a gentleman. I always forget his first name. I think he might just be Junior. Uh, Bongbong Marcos, who is the son of Ferdinand Marcos, who was the former president slash dictator slash one man ruler of the Philippines in the 70s and 80s before he was overthrown in the People Power Revolution. Um, his son has been elected president. His son returned, or I should say, came to power with help from the previous president, who was a gentleman named Rodrigo Duterte. Duterte, very notorious president for basically starting this massive drug war. Tens of thousands of people are dead, and now he is under investigation by the ICC. Very controversial figure, to be polite. His daughter is the current VP. Her name is Sarah Duterte. And in the last couple of months, relations between Sarah Duterte and Bongbong Marcos have completely broken down. And it has culminated in the last couple of days with an interview coming out where Sarah Duterte said, in fact, if anything happens to me, if I'm assassinated, because I fear I will be assassinated, I have given instructions to a hitman, and that hitman is under orders to kill the president. Um, this is kind of a sign of dysfunctionality in the political system, I would say. This is not something that you go and look at and go, wow, that seems like a healthy thing to have happen. Um, she,
This is above Dr. Phil's pay grade. Let me just say that.
I think Dr. Phil would struggle with these two, to be honest. So this comes after a summer in which Sarah Duterte also said, again, she's taking after her father in a lot of ways. She's coming out, she's saying these kind of crazy, wild, off the cuff things, seemingly off the cuff, where she said that if if Marcos didn't back off her dad, she would dig up Ferdinand Marcos's body and throw him in the ocean. Again, this isn't like a televised interview. This is not, off the record. This was very on the record. I'm going to dig up his father and throw him in the ocean, which is just kind of a Baroque threat to begin with. There are multiple issues. It's very clear that Sarah Duterte is running in the next election. It's also very clear that the sort of protection that Marcos was meant to provide for the Duterte political family has just not been forthcoming. He has, particularly in the case of foreign policy, pretty much repudiated the Duterte legacy of playing off the Chinese against the Americans. He's gone all in with the Americans. He doesn't have a lot of time for the Chinese. Duterte is not wild about that. He's also not wild about the fact that he's currently under investigation by the ICC, and Marcos doesn't have a problem with that. Marcos seems to be cooperating. So there are concerns among the Dutertes about that. There are also other issues involving organized religion in the Philippines, involving the Dutertes' involvement with certain Christian churches that are now under investigation, both by the Filipino government and the US federal government, for money laundering and sex trafficking and all kinds of crazy things. There are just a lot of interconnecting threads, and they've all led to what is a pretty ridiculous verbal confrontation between the two families that really I see no sign of this simmering down or cooling off. This just seems to be building to some kind of crescendo. And it's pretty wild, I have to say.
It is. And you look at the security situation of what's actually going on in the South China Sea, and the Filipinos and the Chinese have basically been at loggerheads over small groups of islands that the Filipinos and Chinese both claim, and Chinese basically going after Filipino fishing boats, and the Chinese trying to get Filipinos that are on tiny islands to get off of those islands so the Chinese can claim them. And it's just a complete mess. And you'd think something like this would be able to bring the country together, but it's not. It's probably dividing the country even more, because you've got the two, strongest powers in Asia, United States and China, trying to vie for power and influence through the Philippines. And I think both sides, Marcos is obviously pushing more toward the US, where the US and the Philippines are actually making our defense pact stronger. And Duterte, if you remember back in 2016, 2017, he was basically saying, to hell with the Americans. We're going to start actually buying weapons from the Russians and the Chinese, and we don't need you guys anymore. So you've got this as well that's actually driving a wedge probably between Marcos and Duterte, at least between the two families, in terms of, okay, who's actually going to be getting influence and who's actually going to be able to make these deals, and who's going to be getting, proceeds from these deals.
And it just feels like this is blowing up a little bit beyond their ability to control it, which is always a concern when you see domestic political elites sort of do this kind of behavior. You're like, they may be opening up bottles they can't put the cap back on. It just seems like a situation where very small spark could blow everything up. The Marcos family is very much associated with the northern Philippines, with northern Luzon, and the Duterte family firmly centered in Mindanao and Davao in the south of the country. So there is, in a way, almost a geographical component to this. There's definitely, the hardcore supporters of both are very emphatic about their beliefs, are very aggressive. And, it is a country that has major security issues outside of the issues with South China Seas. They have an ongoing communist insurgency in the north and an ongoing Islamist insurgency in the south.
And piracy.
and piracy driven by both. So you have a lot of problems, and in the middle of this, you're absolutely right. It's a Shakespearean, certainly it's Elizabethan. You have this absolutely baroque battle between these two families breaking out, and it just there's no sign that anyone's calming down. Um, and as Rodrigo Duterte has helpfully told everyone multiple times, they do have hitmen. There are people who work for the Duterte family directly and do kill people. So this is not an idle threat. This is a very calculated threat, but it's not, she's not just saying this to say this. There's no reason to doubt her when she says, I told someone that if anything happens to me, he goes too. Which, I mean, as polarized and ridiculous as American politics is, can you even imagine? That's beyond the ken a little bit.
Or in any country. I mean, you look at the UK, you look at France, you look at any other country that's very ideologically divided right now in terms of right and left. I mean, if anybody said anything like this, it would be, okay, we are completely done with this guy. Well, what are you doing?
And I think the funny thing is, if you look at this, except with foreign policy, where I think you're correct, I think there are serious ideological divisions there. But when it comes to domestic policy, there's no daylight between these people. Sarah Duterte and Bongbong Marcos, there's no real difference in terms of the things they say and the sort of policies they support. But in terms of, I think you're absolutely correct, in terms of who is allowed to have influence, who is allowed to have power, and who is above the law, they do differ. And I think they're starting to differ openly, violently.
Mm-hmm. And then bring out the popcorn. Hopefully, you don't need to sit there and eat the whole box.
Well, and I just again, I hope for the people of the Philippines' sake, it does not descend any further than it already has, and that all parties involved come to their senses. But you never really know.
Yeah, yeah. Let's hope for the best.
Hope for the best. On that note, we're slicing, we're dicing, where, Dave?
Chopping it up.
Fantastic.